Hi, my name is Shauna Aura Knight, and I'm really excited to be talking about my book, A Winter Night's Vigil, and other projects. But first, I understand that there are some questions that have been sent along to me. The first question is, how long have I been writing, and when did I realize this is what I wanted to do professionally? I wrote my first short story when I was in third grade. It was a little sci-fi story, and of course it was terrible, but I think that's about when the bug hit me. I started reading a lot of epic fantasy and science fiction stories probably about the age of 10 or 11. My parents both worked in a bookstore when I was a kid, so our bookshelves were just full of books. And right around then, I was about 12 when I started writing my first novel, and I think between reading all those fantasy stories and writing them, um, that's about when I don't think I could have envisioned my life without writing in it. In fact, writing is what kept me sane through high school, and I did an awful lot of writing. And I always envisioned myself being a published author from about that point. Of course, the novel that I wrote when I was 12 was also terrible, but it led me to where I am now in the books that I'm doing now. The next question is, how do you come up with your ideas, and what is my writing schedule like? So I'm going to give away one of my big, deep, dark secrets. A lot of my fiction ideas come from dreams that I've had. I've done dream work, and by dream work I mean writing down my dreams and working with my dreams since I was about 11. And that's where a lot of my ideas come from. I'll be in a big epic battle or space adventure or all sorts of different things, and that's a lot of those ideas come from dreams. But even a Winter Night's Vigil, some of that came from a dream too. Some of the scenes were from a dream that I had. What's my writing schedule like? That really depends on the day. If I'm really focused on writing or painting for that matter, this is the same thing I do when I'm painting. If I'm really focused on something, I call it write until eyes bleed and then sleep, and that's just, I'm writing as long as I can stand it until I can't read the words on the page anymore, and then I sleep, and then I wake up and I do it again. Other times I have other obligations and it's kind of hard for me to switch gears into writing. But in those instances, I can usually get something like a blog post done or write a nonfiction article. So, there's different schedules for different days, and it really depends on what I have going on. But if I'm just writing, I'll be really focused and just do that. What are my current writing works? Well, the book that I have had out for about a month now is A Winter Night's Vigil. And that is, it's an erotic romance, and erotic romance just means that there's no closed doors. You would pretty much know what's going on once things get spicy. It's about Amber and Tristan, and Amber and Tristan are members of a coven, and they are out in the woods. Their coven has rented a retreat, a little cabin to go on a retreat, and Amber and Tristan discover that they're falling in love with each other. Now, the unfortunate thing is that this coven has determined that anybody within the coven can't have a romantic relationship with each other, and it's not a bad idea because if you've ever been in a small group of friends, in this case the coven has 12 people, those group dynamics get really kind of awkward when you've got people who are dating each other, and then when they break up, then it's a big problem. So this coven has determined that people shouldn't date. But Amber and Tristan are discovering that they're falling in love with each other, and as you might expect, since it's a romance novel, things get pretty spicy. And in this case, they're on a retreat for Yule, for the winter solstice. And so part of the work of the weekend that they're doing together is they're actually doing rituals, and a lot of those are very self-reflective rituals where they're doing shadow work and they're actually doing a vigil, much like a knight, or in this case they're focusing mostly on King Arthur. The kind of vigil where you stay up all night and you consider what's going on in your past, what you are committing to, what you'd like to become, But being honest about yourself and actually looking at yourself in the mirror and looking at your shadows. So they're on this vigil, and they really have to determine how they're going to balance this out, because they can't deny that they're falling in love, but at the same time they've agreed to not be in a relationship with anybody in the coven. So they're really struggling to do the right thing. So there is ritual work, and if you're not familiar with pagan events, this is actually a pretty good introduction, because I think it shows a realistic portrayal of what people engaged in alternative and earth-centered spirituality are doing. It's not a paranormal romance. There aren't vampires and werewolves and big sparkly magic. It's very realistic to what a group of pagans might be doing out in the woods on a retreat. And really a lot of it is very introspective, and it's looking at yourself and looking at what commitments you're making and the person you'd like to become. So that's a little bit of a teaser into the story, and I hope you will check it out and enjoy it. What's the craziest writing idea I've had? I don't know if this one's the craziest, but it's the funniest experience that I've had lately when discussing my writing ideas on Facebook. So I have a Facebook page, and I put things out there just to kind of amuse people every once in a while. So one of the things when you're a writer, you have working titles. Some of those working titles might be really, really ridiculous. Like I have one story that's called "The Girl in the Magenta Dress," and that's not the title that the book is going to have, but that's the, I know when I see that in my Word documents, I know I know which story I'm talking about. Well, so this story idea that I had, and it's another one that came from a dream. I posted on Facebook the working title, and I said, I don't know that anybody would read it with this title, and it was something like Templar cowboys in space fighting shadows with a priestess, or something like that. And like a bunch of people, like a dozen people replied. They're like, yeah, I'd read that. So I don't know. That just kind of amused me. I don't know that's the craziest writing idea that I've had, but it took a lot of different elements, Templars, cowboys, a priesthood, space battles, and kind of mishmashed it together. But I think it's actually going to be a cool story once I get it finished. But I suppose that's what I get for taking most of my inspiration from dreams. What's the story behind this series? Well, A Winter Night's Vigil is currently, it's a standalone, meaning there's just one book. It's not part of a series. However, I am considering writing some other stories and creating it a series of stories. For A Winter Night's Vigil, the story behind it is really, for me, I took a lot of inspiration from the story of King Arthur, and just because both Amber and Tristan are knights in this story. The word knight, and the reason I actually took it from my own last name, the word knight means to serve. That's the original root of the word. And, when you're stepping into knighthood, you're stepping into service. You are there trying to, theoretically, trying to serve and help and make things better. And so the story behind this particular book is that trying to balance out, you've fallen in love and you want to honor that, because that's I think falling in love is kind of a miracle in and of itself sometimes when you actually find that right person. But at the same time, trying to honor your commitments that you've made, and that's what Tristan and Amber are struggling with. And I definitely would like to write some future stories, and I have some ideas for that. Some other winter night little interludes like this. What's my most rewarding experience since being published? I have a cool story about that. So I actually gave up on writing for a while, writing fiction, because I was focusing on writing leadership and group dynamics and facilitation stuff, and I was traveling and teaching a lot of facilitation and leadership stuff, because I'm a big activist in the sense of I'm an environmental activist, but I also believe that leadership can help change the world and make the world a better place. And so I thought, my little stories aren't ever going to change the world, make the world a better place. but the stories were still there, and I had to write them. I couldn't not write them. So one of my stories that came out, there's a woman who contacted me, and she had gotten divorced something like a decade ago, or maybe longer. And she hadn't been with anybody since then, and she hadn't read romance novels before, but she read mine, and she had actually I believe that she had a date scheduled with somebody. She had plans to go out with somebody, and she was really nervous about this because she, for a variety of reasons that I won't get into, but she told me that my story inspired her and helped her feel like she could do this, like she could go out on a date, and she could actually go out with somebody when she hadn't for so many years, and that might be okay. And I started crying when she told me that, because that was certainly not what I was expecting to happen when I wrote that book. I was writing a romancy kind of a story, and I guess as a writer, I always hope that my work is going to touch somebody, but it was really cool to hear how this actually helped somebody going through something in their own life. So that was pretty inspiring. What's one piece of advice that I would give to aspiring writers? It's really simple. Write and keep writing. And if your writing sucks, keep writing more, because you'll get better. And I've read a number of places that you have to get 1,000,000 words of crap out. And I would say that's pretty accurate. I actually went back and typed up all of my old writing from my teenage years. Some of it was absolutely horrendous, but the thing is, I could see how I got better. If I could jump into a book and live in that world, what would it be? Well, if it's another writer's books, I'd probably have to say the Pern series by Anne McCaffrey. That world has always really inspired me. If it was my own books, that would be tough. I've got a lot of books that they're not finished yet, but they'll be coming out eventually. One is an urban fantasy series, kind of urban fantasy paranormal romance, and it'd be pretty cool to live in that world with all the big epic magical powers and really sexy vampire. That would be pretty cool. Although I have to say, I'd be really interested in living in my alternate world fantasy. Big epic dragons and magical powers and really cool armor and really cool clothes, and so that's a tough one. What's my favorite scene in the book, and why do I love it? In A Winter Night's Vigil, I'm going to try and not give away too many spoilers, but there's a scene where the two characters have kind of curled up in bed and they're watching the movie Excalibur. And if you've ever watched the movie Excalibur, it's early 80s cheesy Arthurian movie, and I've been watching that movie since I was a kid, and you can debate my father's dubious parenting skills letting me watch that particular movie when I was a little kid, but it really did inspire me for the Arthurian stuff. I love that movie, and so I mean it's definitely it's what you'd call a cult classic. Watching it now, it's kind of a cheesy movie, but when I wrote that scene, that's really when the characters came alive for me. The idea that these two people are both kind of nerds for Arthurian myth, and they both love this movie even though it's cheesy, and they've curled up to watch this together. That's really when those characters, when Tristan and Amber came alive for me, when I really felt like I understood them and I got them, and I was on their wavelength, and so that actually, writing that scene helped me write a lot of the rest of the book, because there's just this moment when the character kind of comes alive. There's the spark, and for me that was that moment. What are my views regarding indie versus traditional publishing, and do I have any predictions regarding the continuance of the e-publishing boom? I do have some views, and it's constantly changing, and I've been reading lots and lots of articles to try and get an understanding of the whole e-publishing boom and what publishing looks like. And my understanding from reading things is that it changes every few months. But what the e-publishing boom has done is it's done both a good thing and a bad thing. The good thing is that it's opened things up for a lot of authors. There's a lot of authors whose stuff probably couldn't get published by traditional publishers, or at least it wouldn't have gotten any attention, and then those authors' books wouldn't have done well, and then they would have never gotten another book published. So in that respect, it's good because it removed a gatekeeper, and there's a lot of fiction out there that a traditional publisher would have never accepted. They would have never published. But it's done well, and obviously there's an audience for it. And so I think the e-publishing boom is awesome for that. And, myself as an author, it's made it easier for me to get published, I think. And it opens up a lot of opportunities. The downside is that, like I said, there's no gatekeeper anymore. You can just publish your own book. That's also the downside, is that there are a lot of indie books out there, and by indie, I suppose I should be more specific. There's a lot of self-published books out there, because I've been reading a lot more of the independent and self-published books. There's a lot of books out there that are pretty bad. Those are a lot of books out there that really could have used a gatekeeper. The good authors and the determined authors are the ones who are going to keep on getting their stuff out there, and the folks who maybe need another few passes with an editor are going to figure that out and hopefully get someone to help them tighten up their work. I mean, I know for myself, having an editor go through my work is invaluable. It makes my work better. What are my future projects? I have so many future projects. I have a couple of books. I have a few books that are coming out in the near future. Actually, a story of mine was in an anthology from Jupiter Gardens Press. My story is called Werewolves in the Kitchen. So it's a paranormal romance, and it's there's a girl, Ellie, and she's out at a retreat center, and there's two guys, Kyle and Jake, and it turns out that they're werewolves, and so the three of them, as you might expect in a paranormal romance, the three of them get together, and then she realizes that they're werewolves, and she has to figure out what she's going to do, because she kind of likes them both. And they kind of both like her, and so there's some conflict, there's some shapeshifter magic, some cool stuff. And that's actually the standalone ebook for that is coming out here at the end of January. I have a vampire romance novella also coming out. It's called A Fading Amaranth, and it's a vampire in the modern world, and he meets a woman who's psychic, and he can't glamour her, so they end up meeting for coffee or drinks, and then some other stuff happens. I won't give too much away. It's a paranormal romance, so you can probably guess that there's some shenanigans that ensue. I have an urban fantasy called The White Dress the Autumn Leaves, and that's going to be coming out soon. And then beyond that, I have this urban fantasy epic that takes place in Chicago, and there are vampires and creatures and psychic mages. I have some big epic fantasy stories that take place in a secondary world. I have obviously my Templar Cowboys in Space story, and a few other space operas. I won't call them science fiction because I think science fiction is a little bit more literary than what I'm going for. I'm going for probably more of the space opera kind of an angle. So I have all sorts of stories that are brewing. Web design and graphics, do I do them myself? I do. I actually have been an artist since I could hold a paintbrush in my hand, and I thank my mom for that. She would just kind of set me up with a bunch of paper and give me a paintbrush and some water, and I'd go to town painting. I was raised in a very artist-focused household. My mom was, for a while, she was making a living as an artist, and she's a fantastic painter. So I've painted. I do fantasy and kind of mythic paintings. And when I was in my 20s, I learned how to do web design, and that was back That was back in the 90s when you could, if you had a pulse and you could do HTML, you could get a job as a web designer. And so I learned how to do web design back then. And from there, I went into learning how to do graphic design. So yeah, I do a lot of my own stuff. And actually, on my website, I've got some examples of paintings that I've done. I do a couple different styles of paintings, and I also do some of my own covers, and I'm looking forward to doing more. I will say that doing romance covers is pretty hard. Finding the right people to kind of capture the essence of those characters from stock photos is actually it's really challenging. But yeah, I do web design, I do graphic design. I do graphic design for hire, and I sell my artwork as well. And so I guess I really like being able to do that. I like being able to just work on a piece and be able to get that out and not have to hire somebody else to do it, and not worry that their vision isn't going to be my vision. I like being able to spend that extra time working on something and making it really good and look just the way I want it to. So I have kind of a dark, moody, mythic design style, and that's the kind of the imagery I want to come across when I'm doing design work for my own stuff. How do I juggle my many responsibilities? I wouldn't say I always do that well. I tend to need to focus. When I'm working on something, it can be difficult for me to shift gears. So once I'm in writing mode, I really want to stay in writing mode. And when I'm in writing mode and getting things done, things like laundry or eating, the normal domestic kind of stuff tends to fall by the wayside. Similarly, when I'm out teaching, because I travel and teach, so sometimes I might be gone for 4 days or 2 weeks or something like that if I'm traveling. And when I'm out there doing that and then I come back, I can't just jump right back into getting writing done. I have to. It takes me a few days to shift gears. So how do I juggle things? Well, I would have to say that I tend to be one of those people that rides deadlines pretty close, and I tend to procrastinate. I've been trying to get better about that over the years, and I found some tips and tools. Actually, I just wrote an article that's going to get published on a blog for writers and creatives on how I've been working to keep track of my schedule. Using Google Calendar for writing deadlines or for when things are due. And sometimes things just take a lot longer than I might expect. And, so that still, of course, happens too. But what I have found is that it's really, really helpful for me to have a system like that. And so, juggling things, I find that to-do lists are really helpful. But yeah, I don't always do a great job of juggling. The next question is, what do you do when you want to relax and let your hair down? I think that flows really well from the previous question. There's times when I do start to go a little stir crazy and I would like to go do something that is just purely fun. But it's also really good to be able to focus on my writing. Since I put it on hold for so long, it's been really great to have the opportunity to do writing. But when I want to relax, like when I just can't stand writing anymore, or working on various projects, when I come back from teaching, from traveling and teaching, what I very often will do is hide in bed, and I will read a fantasy novel or a romance novel or something like that. That helps me to just kind of reset. But I also will say that when I'm writing and painting, that is relaxing. There's stuff that is less relaxing about the whole process. Like there's all the stuff like after you publish your book, then there's all the stuff after that, and that's less relaxing for me. But painting is very relaxing for me. But I would say as far as social stuff, probably if I'm going out on a date or hanging out with somebody, going out to a movie and eating barbecue sounds like an amazing way to relax and let my hair down. Where did the ideas for my books originate? Well, I already talked a little bit about dreams and how a lot of my book ideas come from dreams, and that's actually what inspired me to write a book about dream work. Is that there's just so much amazing stuff that comes out of our dreams, that I wouldn't be the writer that I am without the kind of crazy dreams that I have. In this case, for A Winter Night's Vigil, the idea for the book came from, I would say, the genesis of the two characters of Amber and Tristan came from just a snippet of a dream. It was a really short dream, but it was two characters and they were in a cabin, and that just gave me the idea for the core relationship in the story. And then additional ideas were based on different pagan groups that I've been a part of, pagan alternative spirituality groups. And I actually did, with some friends, went out to a cabin to celebrate the winter solstice. We didn't have a formal coven or anything, but that was the idea that I had for the setting. So, this particular book was in part some specific stuff that I had happen, in the respect of going out to a retreat center, or, well, it was a cabin out in the woods, but it also came from a dream. The Arthurian stuff is actually, when I facilitate events for the earth-centered and alternative spirituality community around Yule or winter solstice, I will actually often facilitate the types of rituals that you see in the book. And again, you don't need to know anything about alternative spirituality to understand what these folks are doing together. It's they're just asking questions and asking the hard questions that we all have to ask of, what is your power? What is your magic? What is the unique thing that only you can bring to the world? And putting that in context of Arthur pulling the sword from the stone. He didn't ask to pull that sword from the stone. He just kind of did it because he was trying to help his brother out. And but then there were consequences to that. And so what are the consequences when you step into serving, when you step into leadership, when you step into a role like that, whether or not you intended to? The ritual work that they're doing in the book is very much just about who are you and who do you want to be? And I think those are questions that are not, for me, they're not really about religion, they're about being human. And so that's a lot of what the folks are doing in the actual book. And so I actually took inspiration from those for those pieces of the book from actual events that I've facilitated in the past. What did I want to be when I grew up? Well, pretty much what I'm doing now, with a few exceptions. I wanted to be a writer and an artist, and I didn't ever imagine I would be teaching leadership, but I've always wanted to do things, do creative things. I'd like to be doing more big, epic, creative events. I've organized things like a masquerade ball, or I've run themed events like at a science fiction convention. I've built reproduction Star Wars scenery, which has been kind of fun. There's nothing like having a life-size Jabba the Hutt right there in your living room. That's always a good time. If you're a Star Wars nerd, that's a good time. But what I wanted to be when I grew up was a writer and an artist, and somewhere along the way I got the event planning bug. I really like planning events, and I'd like to plan more. I'd like to have the budget to plan bigger, cooler events. That would really inspire me and excite me. What is a quirky writing habit? I do write to music a lot, and I actually soundtrack. I make soundtracks for all my stories. So my music is not sorted by the artist and then the album. My music is sorted by the story and the character. So I'm always, whenever I'm listening to music, I'm like, oh, that should go into this story, or oh, that should be with this character. And so I actually kind of sometimes I'll spend hours sorting music, and it really does get me into the writing headspace. Have I ever instructed or sought a career in any other aspect of writing, like editing or publishing? Well, in general, yes. Instructed writing, no, and I don't know that I would ever be interested in instructing in writing. I do teach leadership and facilitation. Actually, when I first started learning how to be a public speaker, one of the reasons was that I knew that I wanted to get published, and I had attended a lot of science fiction conventions, and you're at these panel discussions with hundreds of people, and there's this panel of writers, and they're all speaking very articulately and about their work, and I remember sitting there thinking, oh, I could never do that. There's all these people. I would just freeze up. And when I had the opportunity to, I did learn public speaking and how to be a good facilitator, because in part because I was like, all right, if I want to be a published author, that's one of the things that I need to be able to do. I don't know that it's necessarily true that every writer has to be able to be a good public speaker. I know many amazing writers who are not good public speakers, but I think it really helps. And given that I love attending science fiction conventions, and that's something that I would eventually like to do, is do panel discussions and workshops at science fiction conventions. I really wanted to be able to get good at that. And so so now that I learned public speaking skills, I teach public speaking. And what I like to say is, I used to be a complete and utter shy wallflower. I could have never gone up in front of a group of people and talked. And now I do that all the time. And it does get easier. It gets better. And I think it's a valuable skill to learn, and I think that most people can learn to do it. I'm not going to say everyone can, because I think there are some folks with incredible social anxiety or some other stuff where it may just not be in the cards for them. But in my case, I was, to my surprise, I was able to learn to do it, and it really doesn't make me all that nervous anymore to step in front of a group and do a workshop. So that's part of why I teach public speaking, is that I want more people to have that opportunity and to not be stuck being afraid and thinking, oh, I could never do that. You may be able to. It takes work. It takes a lot of work and a lot of practice, but it is worth doing. Does my family support my writing career? Yes, my family does support my writing career. Right now, I spend a lot of time with my mom, and my mom is actually very supportive of my work, and I have a funny story about that. But first I'll introduce Ziggy, otherwise known as Ziggurat the Destroyer. I'm actually really surprised that she has not been supporting my writing career by assisting with this video before. She likes to help me out with podcasts by knocking over the microphone, and anytime I'm very much not paying attention to her, she comes over for lovings. And but yes, Ziggy is very, very supportive, very helpful. She likes to help by walking on the keyboard, all sorts of other things. My mom, so when Werewolves in the Kitchen was published as part of the Wild Shifters anthology, that's the one that's coming out here in January as a standalone ebook. When Werewolves in the Kitchen came out, my mom was really very proud of me, and she was hanging out with some friends of hers. They were having some kind of a party, and I think it was one of those pure romance parties, maybe, or I don't know. So my understanding is that there were chocolate martinis or something along those lines, and people were saying, "Oh, so what's going on with you?" And she said, "Oh, my daughter got a book published." And they said, "Oh, what's it about?" And she said, "It's werewolf smut." So then her friends suggested that I come over and do a reading from the book. And so my mom is telling me all this, and I said, "Well, sure, that sounds cool." I said, "I mean, you can't be in the room if I'm reading any of the dirty scenes." She's like, "Oh, come on, I'll have read the book by then." So I think that kind of sums up my relationship with my mom, is that she pretty much supports me in whatever I'm doing and following my dreams, and I think my brother is just happy that I'm writing the stuff that inspires me. He's obviously not going to be reading my romance books. My dad has passed away a few years ago, but I think he would probably arch his eyebrow at the whole writing romance, but I think he'd also be proud of me for getting published. I would write this stuff anyways. Those are stories that I have to tell. They're stories that are kind of burning through my brain. I have to get them out. But it's really great to have that support. It's been really cool to be able to put this interview out there. I love modern technology and the fact that I can do an interview and get it to all of you, and hopefully you're interested in A Winter Night's Vigil, or the book that I have coming out soon, Werewolves in the Kitchen, or some of my other works. And you can find me online at www.shaunaauraknight.com. And if you have any questions, please feel free to message me. I'm always happy to talk. Thanks very much.